Well, hey there, guys. I'm Axel the Beast of ZeldaEngine.net, and this video is about Demise. The final boss of Skyward Sword, and yeah, be forewarned, this is a video about the final boss of Skyward Sword, so spoilers, obviously. But yeah, the final boss of Skyward Sword has, he's been the victim of a number of criticisms, and I don't think he necessarily deserves all of them. I mean, let me just say this right off. I really liked Demise. I thought he was an awesome villain. I thought he was really cool, really badass, really. And I also, one thing I really liked about them, this doesn't really correlate with any of the criticisms, but I thought I'd just get it out there, is I love it how he was like this demon guy, you know, that was never like, no origins were explained, and it was implied that he was actually like a serious threat to the gods and deities of Hyrule, of that world, which really gives him almost a status like the devil. And, you know, as the end of the plot reveals, he's basically the origin of Ganondorf. He's where Ganondorf comes from. So he really has that status as this ultimate evil behind the Zelda series. I think that it's very cool, and it's something I thought that was really awesome about him. Now, moving on to the actual criticisms, there's like three main ones I hear, maybe four arguably. But to start off, Demise is people complain that he didn't really have much of a character, that he showed up at the end of the game, there wasn't anything to him, he didn't do a lot, he was just like, oh, hi, I'm here, fight me, I'm gone. And also that he was anti-climactic in that sense, because he just showed up at the end, there was no explanation, no character development, he was just, he appears and he's gone. One thing is, I feel that this was kind of like Twilight Princess, but like how Twilight Princess should have been. In Twilight Princess, Ganondorf appears at the end. Now let's be clear on something. Demise is exactly like Ganondorf. He has the class, he has the respect for Link. He's just got all those traits of Ganondorf. He was a very Ganondorf-like character. And in a number of ways, Girahim was kind of like an improved Zant as well. So there's that too. Bottom line is, this is basically the same thing that happened in Twilight Princess. You have a villain like Zant and Girahim, who you see throughout the game, and they built up this character, and then Demise appears at the end, or Ganondorf appears at the end. And the funny thing is Skyward Sword does it like I discussed in a video how Twilight Princess should have done it. They build up Zant's or Girahim's character a lot, but they constantly make mention of some power behind him. In this case, they talked about his master. He was talking about reviving his master, and they talked a lot about Demise. Building Demise's character for when he actually appeared. So by the time he actually appeared, there was more to him already. It was the unveiling of an existing character. Demise was in the game. He was a character. He was an important part of the story throughout the game, both as the imprisoned, but also just as this force that's discussed. Everyone talks about him. He's this guy you never see, but he's an important force behind the storyline, behind Girahim, and just an element of the story. And he's like this elemental force you're up against, and at the end, you finally see what this guy looks like. That's not the appearance of his character. That's the climax of his character, which is established and built throughout the game. Now, another criticism people give Demise is that he was actually too easy. Now, this is not true at all. I mean, among fans, this is kind of like an even split thing. A lot of people think he's the easiest Zelda final boss ever, and a lot of people think he was the hardest Zelda final boss ever. It's very much an even thing, and there's no, like, deciding factor here. I won't say he's the hardest, but you can't say he's just incredibly easy. Maybe he was for you, and of course, you're correct. I mean, I can't argue with that, but that doesn't mean he is, like, objectively for everyone. Difficulty in general is totally subjective. I mean, of all game elements that are subjective and subject to opinion, difficulty is arguably the least based on some kind of objective, determinable fact, because everyone has a different playstyle and a different thought process when they play games. Some people are more aggressive, so they'll have trouble with bosses that kind of do a lot of crazy attacks, or that do a lot of damage, or even possibly are possibly have more trouble with bosses that are defensive. It depends. So there's the differences in playstyle that change, and in how the player thinks, even aside from how they play, that make different parts of the game harder than others and easier than others, independent of how actually difficult they may be. Something may be easy for someone and hard for another person. It's just the hardest possible thing to determine as some kind of absolute fact. Demise, for me, was actually pretty hard. I mean, I won't say he's the hardest final boss in the series. He wasn't. I won't say he was, like, really, like, a amazingly hard boss compared to other games I've played, but he was definitely the hardest fight of the game for me. And while I didn't die, I didn't actually die at any point throughout my first playthrough. So, Demise was the most challenging part of the game for me. A lot of people criticize Demise also, both on the presentation side and on the difficulty side, for how you could run back and restock. You could just do, like, okay, you defeat Girahim and you're like, okay, Demise is here, and he's like, oh, come get me when you're ready. And then he just walks off and you can go grab potions and heal and whatnot. But it's optional. It's there to make it easier for people who are having trouble. This function has existed in almost every Zelda game. After you've beaten Ganondorf's first form in Ocarina of Time, you can't exactly save your progress there, but if you die on his second form or during the escape sequence, you can redo the escape sequence right there. You don't have to fight his first form again. It's the same thing, in fact, in Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, and at least in Phantom Hourglass, you can save after you defeated the first form of Bellum, and the second form, actually, the ship battle. So this has happened throughout the Zelda games. It's not unique to Skyward Sword, and what conceivable problem is there with it? It's like the same argument as with the super guides, and it's crap. I mean, you can't argue that because there's some function that makes things ridiculously easy, but you're not in any way pressured to use it, is somehow a fault of the game when it's there for people to make it easier. I mean, if you took that option and it was too easy for you, then you shouldn't have taken it. And I mean, I understand if you thought like maybe you had to, but what I did is I just saved in case I needed to, you know, because there is a statue right there. I saved in case I needed to, you know, like needed to go back, and I went and fought him right away, and it was a challenging fight. And it didn't break up the presentation at all. So really, this isn't something you can fault the game for. It's there for if you want it, and if you chose it. I mean, like, not to insult people who did, but that's kind of your mistake. It's not something you can say the game is at fault for. Now, also, people say that the fight was too short. Like, even, like, aside from difficulty, aside from presentation, there's just not enough of Demise. Even though he was built throughout the game, at the end when he appeared, there just wasn't enough of him. You know, as for him not being enough of him, maybe. I mean, he was really cool. It kind of sucks that you didn't get to see him for a while, but I still like how they presented him throughout the game, and then his actual physical appearance was very short. But in regards to the fight being short, this is another misleading way of looking at it, because Demise's character was established throughout the game, and that was only the culmination of his character. But with the fight, it's almost the same thing, because really, he's the third form of a final boss. The final boss really is the Horde battle against all those freaking enemies that you had to fight your way down through the sealed grounds. Girahim, which was a two-phase battle, and then Demise, which was also a two-phase battle. It was a really lengthy final boss. And again, yeah, you can go back and heal, but that's true of every other recent Zelda game. And again, that's an optional thing. So really, Demise was the final battle of Skyward Sword was a really long fight, of which Demise was one part. Now, the final criticism of Demise is from the plot perspective. People say he creates plot holes because, you know, you kill the imprisoned in the future with the Triforce, but then you go back and there's Demise, and what? And specifically, he references, you know, like, how do you kill him in the past? And if you killed him in the past, then you never would have had to do any of that stuff in the future, and everything would have gotten rewritten. But as I've discussed, Demise was an entity that had conquered time. Fi states this if you do the little scan thing. With Demise. And he even implies this when he says, in the past, which is when he has just been sealed, he says something like, I've been sealed all these years, so he's conscious of it too. This also explains why he doesn't conquer the world when you go back to the future to refill it during the point where he lets you go refill your stuff and whatnot. Because, you know, he's aware of how much time it's passing for you. He's not going to conquer the world yet because you haven't come back yet. You've only been a few minutes or whatever. So basically, time doesn't work. It doesn't matter for him. So that basically, maybe it's a little bit of a cop-out explanation, but it does completely explain the ending. There's no plot hole. Additionally, people complain about, at least I've heard it once or twice, maybe it's not a widespread complaint, I don't really know, but it's worth addressing, is that they complain that he kind of drags down the importance of Ganon because Ganon's suddenly just this reincarnation or / power of this ancient demon, and he's not really a character of his own. I don't think you need to look at it that way. I mean, really, Demise only establishes that his hatred becomes some kind of, you know, an incarnation that will continue to plague everyone. What that means is a little unclear. Does his power just manifest as another being? Is it not really him? Is it actually him? Because the 5 quotes also says that he reappears in a different form in every epoch, so maybe that is Ganon is actually just him again, just appearing differently, somehow reviving. Or, you know, maybe it's just his power corrupting something that otherwise would have existed without him. Maybe Ganondorf actually is a guy. I mean, I think the Wind Waker really does prove that there still is a human element to Ganondorf. I think, if anything, you could just argue that no matter what explanation for Demise you want, somehow he was trying to be a dude and he got corrupted by a demon. Dude corrupted by demon. Wind Waker sort of proves that there's still a human aspect to Ganondorf, I think. Unless they were retconning that, but I don't think there's not a lot of reason to, that you need to think that. I also think, from the plot perspective, Demise's, creation of Ganon thing is at least interesting to speculate about it. Even though you can't prove anything. When you think about Majora and Malladus. Malladus is a demon king, just like Ganondorf and Demise. So it's strongly implied, at least through that thematic connection, that they could be the same, or he's another incarnation. But also, with Majora, it's a demonic entity in another dimension. Could that just be the demise of that dimension? It's interesting to think about. Well, anyway, I've talked enough about this already. I just think that Demise is a really cool, really badass, really well-handled villain. He's just not handled in a traditional way, but he's well-handled, that I think needs more love. I mean, I think that to say that, if you didn't like him personally, okay, I can't stop that, but to say that there's actual problems with how he was designed, I think is a little ignorant of the unique way he was presented in the game, the unique way he was designed. And I think some of the criticisms come from not recognizing that his appearance alone was only part of a bigger thing. I can understand wanting to see him more, because I thought he was really awesome, and I'd love to see him more too, but it's interesting to see Nintendo present the villain in a different way like that, and I think it's acceptable that they did so. But, not everyone will agree. I thought Demise had epic presentation, was really cool, and was a challenging fight. But, not everyone did. So be sure to give your thoughts on the whole thing and on this video in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.